from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome. We have one tale for you this evening, which takes us to a far-off planet amidst the aftermath of a mining disaster. Our story tonight comes to us from S.T. Gillard. S.T. Gillard is a queer, autistic author of speculative and literary fiction. He hails from Scotland, where he completed his M.A. in creative writing in 2023. His short fiction has recently appeared online in publications such as After the Storm, Foufara Press, and Flash Flood. His plays have been produced at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and his sci-fi ballet comic, Breaking Point, was published in 2024 after a successful Kickstarter campaign. He generally prefers the company of dogs to humans, and you can find him and his pooch on Instagram at @STGillard_writer. Children of the night, join me for S.T. Gillard's The Brilliant Mind of Samuel Knight, a Tales to Terrify original.
Sam awoke in a glass box. When he tried to move, he couldn't. When he tried to speak, it came out as a reedy, indecipherable croak. He bit the tip of his tongue until he had pooled enough saliva to swallow. Then he cleared his throat and tried again. "Hello?" The box pinballed the word back at him. There was no answer. Sam narrowed his eyes, trying to peer into the room beyond. He assumed there was a room beyond. The only light was a residual glow emanating from somewhere within the box itself. Outside, darkness yawned, black and infinite. Panic fluttered through him. The glass box looked like a metapod, although as far as he could tell, it wasn't one of Celador's. The Interplanetary Research Federation's pods were larger and usually brimming with medical gel. But Sam's was tiny, like a coffin, and bone-dry. Blood rising, Sam took a deep breath and screamed, "Hello!" A light flickered on, dazzling him. When the stars in his vision dissipated, Sam was looking at an empty lab, platinum gray and spotless. Again, nothing like the powder white of Celador's labs, and far smaller. He scanned the walls. If there was a door, he couldn't see it. "Computer?" Sam asked. No response. He tried several more common interface greetings and salutations before accepting there was no voice-activated software. So what had prompted the lights to turn on? They certainly weren't on a motion sensor. He couldn't move an inch. Sam glanced down at his body, expecting to see restraints, but there were none. His slender frame was wrapped up in an unbranded, figure-hugging jumpsuit. There were no signs of trauma. All his limbs seemed intact, all fingers and toes. He just couldn't move them. Sam's breathing quickened. His skin blazed. Screwing his eyes shut, he willed himself to move, even to twitch, but it was like trying to pry open a safe with a toothpick. He could blink and talk, even turn his head slightly, but nothing below the neck. A spinal injury? If so, what had caused it? Sam's mind raced, trying to recall a fragment of what happened to him, but he was greeted by swirling blackness. A sound caught his ear. Footsteps, rapid ones, growing louder. "Hello?" Sam yelled through a throat of sand. "Hello? I'm here!" The footsteps quickened, the bipedal clack-clack of plastic on metal. Human. "Can you hear me? Please! I'm Dr. Samuel Knight. Can you—" A pressurized hiss filled the room, and one of the platinum wall panels depressed an inch. Then it slid up into the ceiling, whisked away like a magician's tablecloth, to reveal a figure Sam recognized. "Hello, Sam. How are you feeling?" Relief washed over him. "Gale, thank the stars, I thought I was alone." A polished smile spread over Dr. Gale Irani's face, ruffling the cornfield that was his choppy blonde beard. "Not alone, don't worry. How are you feeling?" He repeated his question. Sam was so happy to see the face of his good friend and colleague, he'd momentarily forgotten his predicament. "I can't move." "There was an accident on Opera. We're working to get you up and running, but you've suffered extensive nerve damage. It might take some time." Gale's voice was a calming breeze. He stepped closer to Sam's box, tipping his spectacles to the bridge of his nose. "Can you tell me your full name?" Sam complied. It was important for Gale to know he was in his right mind, even if his memory was patchy. "Samuel Robert Knight." Gale nodded. "Good. And where are you from, Sam?" "Earth. I was born in the new European Republic in 2122. I've been working with you on the Opera mining project for 3 years. I have a doctorate in the sustainability of natural resources from the University of Barcelona and a master's in environmental sciences from the Institute of Extraterrestrial Research, where we met. We work for Celador. I have a husband called Lionel and a dog called Roby. He's a Jack Russell Terrier." Gale waved a hand, his grin widening. "Very good, Sam. Glad that excellent brain of yours is still intact. Are you comfortable?" Sam didn't know how to answer. He was about the furthest thing from comfortable he could imagine. Gale crossed to a small control panel next to Sam's box and tapped a few buttons. A light vapor began pouring into the box from some unseen vent. Sam's eyes widened in alarm, but Gale shook his head. "Don't worry, it's hydration and nutrients. Solid food might not take yet." The mist settled on Sam's face, cold and faintly minty. He took a long breath, relishing the soothing coolness as it invaded his pores. Gale studied him, giving an approving nod once he'd calmed down. "Better?" Sam grimaced. "A bit. What happened, Gale? What accident?" Something flashed across Gale's face, so quick Sam almost missed it. Surprise? No. Relief. He leaned over Sam's box, consuming his field of vision. "What's the last thing you remember?" Sam racked his brains. It was hazy, but he recalled a breakthrough at the dig site. The base had been up in arms, preparing to head underground where the drilling team had unearthed a discovery. Sam had taken a small team to the subterranean lifts, descended hundreds of feet toward Opera's core, approached the breach in the frozen mantle to find... That's where he drew a blank. He recounted everything to Gale, expecting to be cut off at any moment, to have his story debunked as paramnesiac nonsense. But the senior doctor let him talk, nodding along up until the point where Sam's memories fell into a black hole. So you don't know what did this to you? No, said Sam, digging around in the darkness. Is everyone else okay? Gale's eyes flicked down, a chink in his armor. I'm afraid you were the only one we managed to save. Sam blanched. The only one. That would mean dozens of lives, miners, researchers, scientists, had been lost. Everyone he'd brought down into the mine shaft with him. Gone. Icy rivers of guilt filled his stomach. What was it? He asked, his voice a ragged whisper. What killed them? Gale's neck tightened, tendons rippling like harp strings. We don't know. In all honesty, Sam, we were hoping you could tell us. We've tried sending drones down to the breach, but it's completely caved in, and whatever happened down there knocked the drills out of commission, so... He trailed off, not meeting Sam's eye. All those lives. Gale snapped his fingers. Hey, this was not your fault. You didn't know what you were walking into. No one did. We're dealing with exotic minerals on a strange planet. This whole situation is unprecedented. The glass dulled Gale's words, stopping them reaching Sam like ballistic gel catching bullets. This was his fault. He'd summoned an entourage and ran off underground without stopping to consult the drone reports. He'd thrown caution to the wind at the prospect of finding apronite after 3 long years of drilling. He'd let his excitement get the better of him. And now they were all dead. Friends, colleagues, spouses, parents. It was the fire all over again. Insurance will compensate the families handsomely. No one blames you, Sam. Okay, Sam said blankly. Gale placed his large hand on the glass, inches from Sam's face. All you need to focus on is recovery. Right now it might feel like everything's falling apart, but I promise it's only temporary. If apronite is as valuable as we think, we might have just made one of the most important discoveries in all of human history. We need you ready for action, Sam. Can you do that for me? Sam managed a small nod, the cold chains of guilt weighing heavy on his heart. We need him ready, Dr. Irani. General Elodie Harper's hologram carried all the gravitas of her physical form as it paced around Gale's office. Gale scanned her black-suited figure, scrutinized the live image for flaws, a telltale blurriness, or a stray pixel. His eyesight wasn't perfect, but even with his new digital lenses, he couldn't tell the difference. It was uncanny. I know, General. Gale folded his arms over his chest a little too tightly, his augmented biceps firm against his knuckles. He will be, but it takes time to rehabilitate a mind, and Dr. Knight is... sensitive. The General furrowed her brow. Dr. Knight is the greatest scientific mind humanity has produced in decades. Our future depends on his rehabilitation, Dr. Irani. Gale's gut twisted with an underlying tightness, the same twinge that had resided within him ever since he met Sam all those years ago. The quiet boy at the back of the class who, upon introduction, had revealed himself to be 2 years younger even than Gale. It was a strange feeling. For the first time in his life, Gale had met his match. And match was right. Because Samuel Knight was no better than Gale Irani. Different, yes, but not better. Not that anyone else saw that. Samuel Knight was a genius among prodigies. Sam, who'd built his first emission-free combustion engine at just 7 years old. Sam, scouted by NASA when he was 13 and awarded a full scholarship to IER with board and expenses. Sam. Even on Opera, millions of miles from Earth, Gale was cursed to forever be reminded of the wonder that was Dr. Samuel Knight. Gale had been given a scholarship to, of course, 75%, which meant he could afford his damp corner of that basement flat he had to share with 6 other people. It must have been easy to study in Sam's private apartment without the distractions of his roommates having sex behind a paper-thin room divider at 3 a.m. Acquiring new knowledge must have been simple when your brain was fueled by more than cans of 7-hour energy and boiled packets of dry ramen. Had he been given the same opportunities as Sam, Gale was certain he'd have attained the same academic successes, if not greater. He'd have been invited to clandestine suppers with the dean. He'd have been offered a junior position with Celador before even graduating. But, as the old saying went, if you can't beat them, join them. Gale had swallowed his pride and befriended the reclusive Samuel. So began years of long nights working in Sam's apartment, getting lost in their research, partnering on projects, solving problems that left the rest of their cohort stumped. Their professors only had eyes for Sam, of course, leaving Gale to play the competent but overlooked second fiddle. But the time was not wasted. All the while, Gale watched, absorbed, evaluating all the things Sam could do. And all the things he couldn't. For one, Sam fell apart whenever he had to command a room. All that knowledge, and yet the mere thought of leading a team of subordinates was enough to make him fall to pieces. "I can't do it, Gale," he'd say whenever he had to give so much as a class presentation. "Can you do it for me? I just can't." And while not prone to mistakes, Sam burdened himself with catastrophic guilt whenever he made the slightest of errors. A tiny oversight was all it took to send him into complete meltdown. It took the best part of a decade before Gale found out why. Sam had always been cagey about his family. Gale had assumed they'd passed. But it wasn't until an intern accidentally ignited an open gas valve in their lab, unleashing a trumpet blast of fire across the room, that he learned the truth. Gale had slammed the kill switch, cutting off the gas in an instant. No one seemed hurt, at least nobody was ablaze or screaming in pain. But then, he heard the sobbing. Assuming it was the intern, he'd turned to offer them comfort, but found their face, while red with embarrassment, was completely dry. It was then he'd spotted Sam, trembling in the corner, weeping like a lost child. "What's wrong?" Gale had asked, grabbing his friend's shoulder. "Sam, what happened?" "My fault," Sam whimpered over and over again. "My fault, my fault, my fault." Gale addressed the room. "Everybody out!" Technicians and interns filed out of the lab, whispering amongst themselves, until Sam and Gale were alone. "Listen," said Gale, sitting on the floor beside his shivering colleague. "It was a stupid mistake, and you were nowhere near. How can this possibly be your fault?" "No," said Sam. "The fire." Gale frowned. "The fire's gone, Sam. It's fine." But Sam shook his head. It took another 15 minutes for Gale to prise the story out of him. From an early age, Sam had shown a keen, borderline obsessive interest in amateur robotics. Recognizing this wasn't a phase that would diminish with time, the Knights gave up their garage as a place for Sam to tinker and build to his young heart's content. They were running late for dinner one night, and Sam, who'd been working on a new machine all day, had to be forcibly detached from his project by his mother to be washed and dressed for the restaurant. In the chaos, he'd left the soldering iron plugged into the mains. There it stayed for hours, searingly hot, while the Knights enjoyed their meal, blissfully unaware of the inferno kindling in their garage. They returned home to a full-blown blaze. Terrible though it was, the Knights were not poor. Their 3-bed, 2-bath suburban home was thoroughly insured. It would have been forgivable, a dark smear on the family's history, were it not for the fact Sam's grandparents had been trapped inside. Sam had been 9, and as Gale understood it, his relationship with his parents had never been the same. Survivor's guilt. That's what reduced Sam to a crumbling wreck whenever he made the slightest of slip-ups, whenever he was anything less than perfect. Despite popular belief, Samuel Knight was not perfect, and as General Harper brought up Sam's brilliant and unique mind once again, it wasn't the Nobel Prize-winning scientist that swam into Gale's thoughts. It was the shivering wreck on the laboratory floor. This was the man humanity had pinned its hopes on. "I can't do it, Gale." Sam's weakness made the bitter pill of jealousy easier to stomach. If Sam was better than Gale, why was Gale his superior officer on the opera project? If Sam was better, why had he been the one to get himself blown up by whatever he'd found down there? Because he wasn't better. He was just as fallible as the rest of them. And now, he was at Gale's mercy. General Harper cleared her throat. "I've seen the latest diagnostics, Gale. He's guilty. He blames himself for what happened in the mine. You shouldn't have been so blunt with him." Gale bit his tongue, kept his face placid. "Guilt can be a powerful motivator, General. I know Sam. I know how his mind works. Just trust me." "Have you forgotten how rehabilitation works, Doctor? He has to be willing, and he will be," said Gale, cutting her off. He conjured the same smile he'd used on Sam just this morning. "I just need a little more time." Harper scowled. "Time is a resource we are fast running out of, Doctor." The General terminated the call, her hologram evaporating in a cloud of loose pixels. Gale stared at the blank space left in her wake. Running out of time. She was right about that. Earth needed him to succeed, almost as much as he did. Gale brought up the interface and opened Sam's file. It was time to move forward with the plan. "I thought I'd have healed by now," Sam said to Gale on his most recent visit to the lab. Gale ignored him, typing away on a holographic display projected from his glasses into the air. He seemed distracted today, but Sam wasn't ready to back down. He'd been stuck in this coffin for weeks, and his nerves were shredded raw. "How much longer do you think I'll be in here?" Gale brushed the display aside and looked Sam up and down. "Your rehabilitation takes priority, Sam. We need you ready to resume work as soon as possible." Frustration bubbled up in Sam's throat, hot and acidic. "Sorry, but how can I do that if I'm stuck in here?" Gale let out a long sigh. "You're right. You can't." "So what are we going to do about it?" said Sam, incensed by his colleague's apathy. "And how is being in here helping? There's no Metagel, no autosurgeon. There's just you." "What's your point, Sam?" Weeks of pent-up questions rose in an unstoppable tide. "My point is you're doing nothing to get me out of here. Where's the medical officer?" Gale blinked. "They died in the cave-in." Sam winced as guilt's icy claws dug into him once more. So the lack of proper treatment was his fault, too. He lowered his voice to a whisper. "I want to speak to Lionel. Or General Harper. Someone. Please, Gale. It's been weeks of this." Gale shook his head. "It hasn't been weeks, Sam. It's been barely a day." Sam stared at him. "No, that's impossible." "Not at all," said Gale, bringing up the display again and spinning it around so Sam could see. "Look, today's date is the 12th of November, 2170. And here the record of the accident. See? The 10th, less than 48 hours ago." Sam's mind reeled. He tried to speak, but his thoughts were unspooling faster than he could catch them. Gale's mouth turned upwards, not a smile, exactly, more a smear of pity. "Are you coping all right, Sam? I don't want you losing your marbles down here." I don't know." Gale stepped closer, peering at him through the glass like he was some kind of exotic fish in an aquarium. It's a lot to handle, isn't it? What happened down there? Sam's face grew heavy. Yes. I suppose you'll be anxious to return to the project, so their deaths won't be in vain. Sam blinked. Recompense hadn't even crossed his mind. Should it have? He wondered. Did the fact that it hadn't make him even more of a terrible human being than he already felt? They gave up everything to be here, just like you and I, Gale carried on. Completing the opera project is the only way to make their deaths mean something. Don't you agree? What was Gale saying? That successfully mining apronite would somehow justify the casualties? Sacrifice a few for the needs of the many? No. He couldn't brush what he did under the carpet for the sake of utilitarianism. Regardless of the project's outcome, Sam would have to live with the consequences of his blunder forever. Sam? Gale's nose was almost touching the glass. Wouldn't you agree? Sam looked into his friend's eyes and didn't recognize the man staring back at him. This wasn't the Gale he knew, the man whose brilliant mind and humanitarian compassion had charmed the science world, the friend who had Sam's back through every bout of anxiety, every crippling panic attack he'd suffered throughout his career. This wasn't that Gale. The Gale before him was cold, almost mechanical. His monotropic stare was devoid of sympathy. Come to think of it, he hadn't shown the slightest shred of grief for what had happened down in the mine, not an inkling of sadness, and those were his colleagues, too. As Sam's head spiraled, the lab behind Gale grew dark and distant. Sam turned his attention to the room, willing it back into focus, but it was as though someone was fiddling with the aperture of his irises, enshrouding the lab in shadow. What's wrong, Sam? Gale's voice was a blunt instrument, hollowing him out. I don't... Sam's gaze flicked back to the man looming over him. Where are we? Gale swallowed, his thick neck straining the collar of his shirt. What do you mean? Sam fought to keep his panic under control, to form coherent sentences. Well, it's all wrong. My clothes are wrong. The metapod isn't one of ours. Even the lab doesn't look right. The more Sam looked, the less it made sense. The unfamiliar decor, the missing details. It was all wrong. The only structures on the planet belonged to Celador, flown in as kits and assembled by drones, all virtually identical on the inside. But this was nothing like any of them. The truth curdled sour on Sam's tongue. We're not on APRA, are we? Gale's face was a blank slate. Where are we, Gale? The other doctor shook his head, his lips curling like he'd just bit into a lemon. He stepped back from Sam's pod, the lab swimming back into focus around him. He sighed. You're too smart for your own good, you know. The air tightened. Sam's breathing quickened, though no fog appeared on the glass in front of his face. What are you talking about? Gale sucked his teeth, almost impatiently. No, we're not on APRA. Well, I am, but you're not. You're not anywhere, Sam. Gale left his words hanging there for effect, as though his silence might help Sam decipher their meaning. But I'm here. I'm here with you. No, you're not, said Gale as though it were obvious. What you're seeing isn't real. You just can't tell the difference. Gale tapped his spectacles, and a digital display appeared on the glass wall of Sam's box. At the top was written, Dr. Samuel Robert Knight, Psychometrics. Below were rows of moving graphs, like a dozen erratic ECG machines spiking up and down. On the right-hand side, a section marked time dilation caught Sam's eye. Beneath it was a ratio, 1 to 24. And below it, at the very bottom of the screen, were the words, rehabilitation probability, 6%. Your body was destroyed in the mine, along with the others. Only your brain was recovered, preserved in a synaptic chamber until a digital copy could be created. You're a copy, Sam. A string of code. Sam's mind raced. But I have a body. He tried desperately to move his limbs, but they stayed still as ever. It's easy to convince a mind it has a physical form when that's all it's ever known, said Gale, his voice uncharacteristically cold. We coded you a body, but you're data on a hard drive. Obviously, we couldn't have you wandering, creating a whole reality for you to blunder around in is hardly practical, so we rendered you immobile and told you were injured. Cruel, you might say, but a mind has much better odds of rehabilitation if it believes it can recover. Sam's brain was about to burst. The graphs on the display spiked higher, scrolled faster. Who's we? A cruel smirk twisted Gale's face. Celador, of course. You think they'd let your brain go to waste? They own that mind of yours, Sam. You signed it over to them the second you took the job. Sam couldn't hold back anymore. Until now, he'd held on to a sliver of hope that Gale was lying, or that eventually he'd wake up from this nightmare. But the dreadful pieces whirling through his head had finally fallen into place. Sam screamed. As he did, the display in front of him flashed red. The rehabilitation probability figure plummeted. 4%. 3%. Gale whisked the digital screen away, centering it back in front of himself. Okay, that's quite enough of that. He tapped a few buttons, and like a Ziploc bag, Sam's mouth sealed shut. He no longer had lips, just flat, unbroken skin. His screams suffocated in the hollow of his throat, tears of fury streaming from his eyes as he fought against the programming keeping him paralyzed. But he was helpless, trapped, a rat in a cage. All the while, Gale watched in unflinching silence. All done? Gale asked once Sam had finally run out of steam. Sam knew now his eyes were nothing but a sequence of zeros and ones. Still, he glared at Gale with all the hatred he could muster. Good, said Gale, far too calmly. I suppose you're wondering what happens now. Sam didn't give him the satisfaction of nodding. This isn't how I'd have liked to present your options to you, Sam, but needs must. So here's the deal. You agree to have your consciousness uploaded into Celador's Hive mainframe and continue your research indefinitely from the comfort of a digital workspace. Before you say no, Sam had already begun shaking his head, you'll be given everything you need to work to your heart's content. We can simulate food, leisure activities. Like I said, we don't have the resources to generate a whole reality for you just yet, but you'll be comfortable. You just won't be, allowed to leave. If Sam still had lips, he would have spat. Gale seemed to infer as much. He sucked his teeth impatiently. This is your chance to make amends for what happened, Sam. I've seen the reports from the mine. We're so close. Sam's jaw worked as he tried to speak. Gale raised an eyebrow, then flicked a few buttons. Sam's mouth gasped back into existence. He coughed and sputtered, choking on virtual air. I thought you said it wasn't my fault. Gale cocked his head. Did you believe that? Sam felt sick. So this is what Celador, what Gale worked on behind closed doors. A digital contingency in case the opera mission failed, or just a way for them to immortalize their workforce. So, that's it. Sam's voice came out dull and lifeless. I become a slave while you swoop in and take all the credit. That was a shot in the dark, but the twitch in Gale's left eye told Sam he'd hit the mark. He twisted the dagger. This is my work, Gale. Mine. I will not be brushed aside like an afterthought for you to step in as humanity's savior. Gale looked stunned, like Sam had burst free from the pod and slapped him senseless. I didn't realize it meant that much to you. You were never in it for the glory. I'm not, said Sam. Saving Lionel, everyone back on Earth, that's what I want. To save us. A heavy silence fell upon the lab. Gale chewed his lip. His shoulders slumped forward. Harper was right. Maybe we are going about this the wrong way. What? Gale let out a long, defeated sigh. I thought I knew you, Sam. I thought I knew exactly how your mind worked. You were always so ashamed of your mistakes, so driven to rectify them. I thought that's how we'd get you. But perhaps a different tack is needed. A phantom heartbeat quickened in Sam's chest. What do you mean? I mean, we'll have to start again. Start again? But Gale was already typing away on the display, and Sam didn't have to ask what he was planning to do. Gale had full control over Sam's mind. What he saw, how quickly time passed for him. All along, he'd been trying to wear him down to gain his compliance, but he'd failed. Now he was going to start over, which meant he'd need a clean slate to work with, one where Sam didn't know what he was planning. Gale turned heel and made for the exit, still tapping away on the screen. Any one of those buttons could trigger the fatal command. He had seconds. An idea exploded in Sam's head, a last Hail Mary. Stop! I remember. Gale hesitated, halfway out of the door. Sam snatched his chance. I remember what we found in the mine. If you wipe me, you won't know what you're dealing with. Listen to me, Gale. I remember. Gale turned slowly and smiled. No, you don't, Sammy. It happened so fast you didn't know what hit you. I should know. I laid the charges myself. Sam's eyes widened in horror as Gale's hologram disintegrated. Then everything went black. Sam awoke in a glass box, up to his neck in Medigel. When he tried to move, he couldn't. When he tried to speak, it came out in a reedy, indecipherable croak. He bit the tip of his tongue until he had pooled enough saliva to swallow. Then he cleared his throat and tried again. Hello? The lights blinked on, momentarily blinding him. Once his eyes adjusted, he saw he was in a compact laboratory, pastel white, with the Celador logo emblazoned on the wall. A familiar figure stood in the corner, his face bright with surprise. You're awake. Gale? Dr. Gale Irani shot him a warm smile. Hello, Sam. Sam glanced down at his body, engulfed in blue Medigel, fully dressed in a Celador issue medical shirt and trousers. He tried to lift a hand, but couldn't. He couldn't move at all. Gale's eyes glistened with sympathy. There was an accident on Opera. In the mines. You were hurt, but you... Gale swallowed thickly. You saved everyone, Sam. Your warning got them out of there in time. You're a hero. Sam frowned, his head throbbing. He tried to think, but his mind roiled with a dense black fog. I don't remember... Gale held up a hand to silence him, his pearlescent teeth beaming. Don't worry, Sam. I'm going to tell you everything.
That was S.T. Gillard's The Brilliant Mind of Samuel Knight, as read by Andrew Gibson. Andrew was pulled feet first from the swamps of South Louisiana, kicking and screaming, and remains mostly as such to this day. You can find his work on Audible under Andrew Gibson, or, for the more romantically inclined, Blake Lockhart. You can also catch him streaming his recording sessions live in the Narrator Nook and the Haven Discord servers. Links are in the show notes. Thank you, Andrew. Well, children of the night, the hour is late and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D. Hegre, whose generous support keeps these lights on and flickering ominously. If you're not a supporter, head over to patreon.com/Tales to Terrify. You'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles. Every dollar goes back into this show, and we appreciate your support so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost you a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales, too. You can show your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch. TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week as we traverse dark dimensions with more Tales to Terrify.